Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a series of 11 webinars designed to give you practical information to help you accelerate the growth of your business. My name is Peter Jeffrey and I'm the Business Development Manager for the City of Greater Bendigo. On behalf of the City, we're proud to partner with the team at the Business Re-Education Centre in Bendigo to bring you high quality, practical information about how to grow your business through simple and effective actions and measures. Grab a pen and please be ready to take some notes so that you can be sure to implement the actions that you identify as appropriate for your business. I strongly encourage you to act on this advice, even if it's the most simple suggestion that captures your attention. At the end of this webinar, there will be mention to future events that I also encourage you to consider for further business support. At the City, I work within the Economic Development Unit and we're focused on bringing high calibre events and initiatives to you to enhance the success of the local business community and businesses like yours. If you would like to know more, please contact the team at the City of Greater Bendigo to discuss all available options for local small business on 5434 6000. Now, I'd like to introduce your presenter, Paul Henschel, who's the CEO for the Australasian region for Action Coach International. With over 20 years experience, I'm sure he's got some great information to share. So now it's over to you. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Peter, very much for that, and welcome aboard everybody for our 9th webinar in the series of growth, the Small Business Growth Accelerator series. And of course, this particular webinar is called The Right Person in the Right Job, and it's all about doing exactly that. You might have noticed that our visual for that is in fact round pegs, round holes, square pegs, square holes, etc. So I guess the real theme of this, obviously, and the thrust of this is that getting the right person in the right job, and that means it's all about getting the right peg in the right hole. Now that might seem fairly obvious, but it's not necessarily what everybody tends to do when they're recruiting, and even in terms of restructuring. It's also appropriate for restructuring people within the existing organisation, even existing people within the existing organisation, to make sure again that the right jobs are being assigned to the right people, and that will be part of what we talk about today. But the main part will be working through what I have found to be a very effective recruiting system, a very efficient one, a very effective one, and one that and I say primarily gets the right people in the right hole, because I think it's dangerous to say that something's fail-safe, but it's certainly over my dozen or so years of coaching and utilising this system with from both myself and clients, then the hit rate has been extremely high. So let's have a look and see what that system is. So the right peg in the right hole has to start with the right hole. So what we'll look to do here is appreciate what is the role, what is the job that we're looking to fill. So we start not with the person, but with, in fact, the job. Again, does that seem obvious? Probably, now that I say it, but it gives us a real solid starting point. So let's talk about what that means. The first thing to appreciate about the job is not what it's called, not its title or anything else, but what are the, and I say 4 to 6, it's a guide. I think that if you start to talk about more than that, you're probably talking about duties and responsibilities rather than objectives. So what are the 4 to 6, and again, might be 3, but the small number of key objectives of the position. So if the position's all about sales, then it will be the key objective is to generate connections that generate so many sort of connections. In sales, it might be fundamentally to convert or to sell X amount. So what we're talking about is what's the outcomes of the position, not what are the inputs, but what are the outcomes? What is the job there to produce? And if we can couch that in only a few key objectives, then it's very clear what role the position plays within the company and how it will contribute to the success of the business. The second part about that, and I alluded to some numbers in that key objective, for instance, how many X amount of sales, let's say if we were in the car industry, and it would be to at the end of the day, it would be to sell 15 cars a month. So that sounds easy in car sales, but in your business and around your objectives, what we need to do next is actually look at each of those key objectives and understand how they will be measured. Not what the number is just yet, but how will those key objectives be measured? Because now we're starting to put some accountability on the role right from the start. And so when people come on and eventually undertake this role, and a year later, or 6 months later, or even 3 months later, that they'll appreciate whether they're actually achieving their objectives or not. So it won't be a case of, how do you think I'm doing? It will be very clear to them, pardon me, and to yourself, how well they're actually doing. So understand how it will be measured. So then we're talking about the tasks required. What are the tasks, the key tasks that will be required to achieve each objective? So take each objective at a time, whether there's 3 or 4 or 5, and understand, so fundamentally, what are the key tasks that will need to be performed, in your opinion, to achieve each of those objectives? And will they? Well, I'm assuming that you understand the role that you're putting somebody into well enough to be able to actually do those things and create this list. So what are the tasks? How are they performed? Now we're starting to get down to actual duties and actions. So now we're talking about how to fulfill those tasks. So the tasks are related to the objectives, and now we're actually saying, okay, this is how you do each of these tasks. So this is the how-to manual. Appreciating that what you're forming here is, in fact, this how-to manual that you will train the incumbent or the incoming person in this role. This is how they will actually be trained. This is how they will learn the job. It'll be learned because it'll be already documented on how to do what the outcomes are, what are the tasks that need to be undertaken around those objectives, and how are each of those tasks performed. Now, if that sounds a labour-intensive task, well, you're probably right. But if you want success in this role, then these are the requirements. You might find that they're actually a lot simpler than you think, than what it might seem straight away. So, and then finally, how long do they take? So how long do those tasks take? This gives you an indicator of how long, of how much time you need to employ somebody for. You don't always need to employ people full time, and if it's part time, you want to know how many hours. Now, it's pointless employing somebody for insufficient number of hours to do a job, and also it's pointless to employ somebody for more hours than what they actually need to be done. They'll just get bored, or they will in fact follow Parkinson's law, which says that they'll expand the job to fill that time. So you've got to pretty much have a pretty good idea how long the tasks actually, how long this job takes to perform, and you've also then got the ability to give that to the person coming in as a guideline so that they actually know how long the job is supposed to take. Otherwise, you know, what is the indicator? So hopefully that makes sense. The key objectives, how they're measured, what the tasks are that lead to those objectives, how those tasks are performed, and how long they take. This is your preparation. So you've got a really, really great profile now of what the job actually is, and so therefore now you can write that. You can now write a job description. You'll say you'll include the objective. You'll include a summary of the business, what it does, what its objectives are, what the key objectives of this position are, what the key tasks are. You won't include how they're performed in the job description. That comes in a manual once the person's employed. But now you've got and of course you've got also how long it takes. So now you've got a really solid job description to start this off. So now we look for, now that we've appreciated what the whole looks like, or the role looks like, we can now start to identify much more clearly what sort of person we're looking for the job. So here we go in terms of appreciating or how we identify the peg or the person I'm referring to. The first thing we're doing is appreciating and identifying their values, because the real issue is most of the challenges come down the track when the values are not shared, and that means yours and therefore the businesses and theirs. So what do I mean by that? Well, we'll talk about values as we go along, but understand that the values are the first thing. So I'm looking about with people who have got, if it's to do with, you know, if you like, if customer service and learning and commitment are your values, then that's what we're starting to look for. The second thing we're looking for is a match in terms of behavioural profile. So what's the behavioural profile of the job, and therefore what's the and we're looking for a match with a prospect's behaviours. The third thing we're looking for is attitude. What attitude is appropriate? Now you can generalise and sort of say a good one, but that's unfortunately too general. So what is the what is the attitude that's going to fit your business? And then finally, of course, what's the skill set? So if you can look at that list and see the order and appreciate that skills are at the bottom of the list. Too often I see people employing on skills, but of course they generally don't fire on skills. They hire on skills and they fire on the other three, on one, two, or three of the other things. So what we really need to do is start with those other things, because I mean, let's face it, if you connect with someone with the matching values, with the right behaviours and the right attitude, then the skills can be learned or taught. It's more important to get the first three right than it is to get the fourth one right and ignore the first three. So let's talk about each of those areas. Values. So here I've put up an example of what are values. How well do the candidates' values match yours? Okay, so what have we got to know? Well, we've got to know what your values are first. So your values, if you're the business owner, are in fact the values of the business. So generally it's not very hard to sort of ask the question, well, what are the values of my business? And you need to ask the question, what do you value as the business owner? What are your top dozen or so, at the most, values? Because, and if you like, values are your guide, your guiding light, your overall rules, if you like. It's important, really important, to actually sit down and list what your top dozen or so values actually are, and they become your overarching guide for the behaviours that will be accepted, encouraged, and those that obviously won't. So the first thing you've got to do is determine what your values are. Then you can start to well, you can use those in your, if you like, in your recruitment, whatever methodology that looks like in terms of advertising or whatever. You can use those to attract the right candidates in the first place. I've always found that giving people access to the values of the organisation tends to be an attraction when they look at the values of the organisation and they say, gee, that sounds very much like me. Well, now you're on the right path. But you've got to set yours and then look to establish what theirs are. And how do you do that? Well, we'll talk about the interview a little bit further, but getting people or finding out how well they match is simply a part of the process. So there's the values part. I want to spend a bit of time on behaviours, how we identify behaviours in this case. And one thing that I have used for a long time, and a lot of people have used now in recruiting, is profiling. If you're not using any sort of profiling, then you're really hit and miss. You're really not doing much of a job in terms of recruitment. How do you, because this is the next level of identification that is so crucial to getting the right person. You see, what we've found is that certain behaviours that are inherent in a person, ingrained in a person, contribute very much to how well they do certain jobs and how how poorly they might do certain jobs. We'll go through this and I'll explain it as I go. I use a behavioural profiler called DISC, D-I-S-C, and we'll explain what that stands for. But the rationale for this is it's quite a simple behavioural profile, but it's extremely powerful and quite easy to understand. And I'll take you through that. For those people who are familiar with DISC, this will be a reminder. For those that aren't, it'll be some quite new education. So we have four fundamental styles. Now, each person in the world is a combination of all four. So if you like, their thumbprint is the combination of how much D, how much I, how much S, and how much C. And there's no rights and wrongs, but there are certainly DISC profiles that go with certain types of jobs that almost are prerequisites almost, or leaders to the success within a certain job. So let's put these four letters up, D, I, S, and C, and they stand for dominant, influencer, stable, and compliant. Now, these are the primary behavioural style, and to be able to define them fairly simply, we find that the top two, D's and I's, dominant and influencers, are outgoing people, whereas compliant and stable are more reserved type people. So you can so to say to yourself right now, are you an outgoing person or are you a reserved person? You've automatically halved the possibilities. You're either D or I or C and S. Now, on the left-hand side, you'll see D and C. They're task-focused people. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're looking at I's and S's. They're people-oriented. So if you're an outgoing people-oriented person, your primary profile or primary characteristic will be I. If you're an outgoing task-oriented person, your primary characteristic will be D. A reserved, a people-based person who's reserved will be an S, and a task-focused person who's reserved will be a C. So let's look at each of those as we go independently. So the D stands for dominant. Now I've made these into so that you can remember them and so that it's a little bit more, I suppose, easy to explain. I've turned them all into, if they were birds, the D would be an eagle. Okay, so what's the characteristics of a D? Well, the D stands for dominant. They love problems to solve, problems to dominate. They're characterised by being quite fast-paced. Clearly, they're decision makers and they love to lead. So you'll find a lot of high Ds, let's say, in positions of ownership and positions of management because they like to call the shots, if you like. Now, if you're looking for a position that requires those characteristics, then you're looking for somebody who is primarily a D. They're competitive and directing. They focus on what needs to be done and how quickly. So very much they ask what-based questions, and they're very structured around outcomes, goals and results. So you might think, well, that's a great profile for everybody, every job that I've got in my business, but not really. Think about it. Is it really ideal to have a business full of chiefs and no Indians? If you're looking for an Indian, then you're not looking for a D. And in fact, if you put a D in that position, of course, what they'll start to do is create a bit of chaos by fundamentally taking control and wanting to, I suppose, do more in decision making than perhaps what you're looking for. So that's a D type characteristic. Now, I'm talking about each of these characteristics in isolation, remembering that everybody's a combination of all four of these. But I'm looking at each of these ones in its fullest sense to give you an idea about what a D actually looks like. So again, if the position requires those sorts of characteristics, then a high D is what someone with a lot of D is what you're looking for. Let's look at the I. Remember that this is outgoing, people-oriented. So what are they? Bird, peacock. They like to be noticed. They like attention. It's very much a case of look at me, hence the peacock. Now, what they're great at influencing people. They can get people to do things. So they're good leaders. They're characterised, they're quite talkative. They love interaction and they love social. So where's the application for this? Well, imagine sales, for instance, without those characteristics. Building rapport, establishing connection with people, high levels of communication, all of those nurturing characteristics in sales, perfect. So, the high I loves those sorts of situations, and those situations love those people. So they're talkative and interacting. They focus on who, because the big deal is people and other people. So, where you're looking with a role that's got a lot of interaction, requires a lot of nurturing, requires a lot of communication with people, requires a lot of, as you say, influencing rather than dominating and directing, then this is the type of behavioural profile that you're looking for. So their challenge is they're always looking necessarily for approval themselves. So of course they need to be acknowledged. When high eyes work for you, you have to make sure that they're getting lots of recognition and acknowledgement for what they're actually doing. Okay, so that's the high I. Now, what's the S? The S is stable. The S loves sameness. The bird is the dove. Who doesn't love doves, right? It's like there's heaps of them in the world. They don't usually upset anybody. They're all of those sorts of things. They're quiet, they're unassuming, they go about their business. That's the S. So very stable. They like to work at a steady pace. They stay around for a long time because why? Because they don't like change, and therefore they're loyal. They're loyal because they don't like to change, and so they stick with what they know. Again, so unobtrusive. If they've got a negative, it's that they harbour grudges. You never want to do the wrong thing by an S. They may not get you quickly, but they will get you somewhere down the track. So, but that aside, you can appreciate that if the job is one that requires relative sameness, just work along, nothing much changes, come in, do the job, go again, tomorrow's pretty much the same. It can mean, because the people interaction is perfectly fine because they like to interact with people, they just don't like to be the highlight of those people's life. If you've got a job, if this job is one that is relatively, that is quite consistent, that is quite repetitive, then you're looking for an S in those positions. They're accepting and doing. They focus on how things will be done. So remember, the D was about what needs to be done. The I was very much around who. The S is very much about how things are done. So if you like, they're, as we see here, their priority on cooperation. They don't like to rock the boat, and stability. Again, so you'll see, say, wow, that's a great characteristic. That's what I'm looking for in this role. Terrific. That's why you'd use a profile to find out whether that's their key, their primary trait. And certainly in Australia, you'll generally find that around 50% of the population are in fact S's. So you've got a pretty fair shot at actually attracting a few of those, and there's quite a lot around. Okay, so that just leaves the C. So what's the C? The C is compliant. What would the bird be? They're factual, they're statistical. The bird is, of course, the owl. So best characterised, so the wise old owl. And here's the characteristics of the C. They love procedures. They love detail. They finish jobs. They like rules to follow. The term compliant doesn't come from nowhere. They are rule followers. So, if you've got systems and procedures and a lot of and workflows, and it has to be done this way, the C is a great profile for that sort of work. If it's if it's figures based, if you look at what sort of jobs do compliant people fall into, well, they fall into engineering, bookkeeping, accounting, mechanics, surgeons even. The people where routine, or if you like, process rules the roost. So, funnily enough, with birds. I guess if you're going to fly on a plane, you'll certainly want it to be, the confidence would be that it's been built by a high C. Every nut and every bolt, every tick, everything's been analysed and everything's been qualified. Great in those jobs, but of course, put that in the wrong job, and that can be that mean it could slow down, it could be over-analysed and all of those sorts of things. So of course the C's, they assess and they're thinking type people. They really focus on the why. They ask lots of why questions because they want the detail of every job. Quality and analysis. Now again, thinking about that, what does your job require? And you can say, well, it requires all of these things. Okay, well then that would be the mix. But what is the right mix for this job, for the job that you've outlined in your job description? So by being able to analyse the job, we can actually start to connect the right people with the right job, and it's just more of the right peg in the right hole. So if we think about the D, I, S and C, we're talking about the D's primarily going to be more in management and leadership and decision-making type roles. The I is going to be lend itself more to people and the interaction with people. The S is looking for a job that's actually quite unchanging and long-term and repetitive, and the C is looking for lots of process-oriented side of things, quality, qualitative analysis, numbers, that sort of thing. Okay, so just as a profile summary, you'll see here the D, they like the problems, in order to avoid loss of control, so they love control. The influencer they love people to influence in order to avoid loss of affinity, which is, people loving them, as it were. A stable pace, steady pace. They have security in that steadiness and in that safety. I said they're not high risk takers. And the compliance, love procedures to comply to in order to avoid the loss of quality. So they're all about quality control. So I hope that gives you a pretty good understanding very quickly of DISC. I can do DISC days. I could do DISC for a week, but that's just very much an overview, and that's the reason why I've always loved using DISC, because it's relatively easy to understand. It's definitely takes quite a while to master, but it doesn't take very long to understand and to connect and to sort of get it, if that makes sense. So now, how do you know what a person is? Well, you can tell from some of their characteristics, but more importantly, of course, you get them to do a profiler within an interview, and you know for sure what their actual mix is. I talked before about understanding the role. Now, there is such a thing as a reverse DISC assessment, which means that once you've established what that role is, which we did earlier in the webinar, we can do a reverse DISC on it, which means that we can do a behavioural profile on the role itself, not on the person, but on the role. So we build a DISC profile, how much D, how much I, how much S, and how much C is ideal for the role based on the role itself. Hope that makes sense. So reverse engineering, we're DISC profiling the job, and then we're DISC profiling the people that apply for it and look to see how well that matches. So that's called a reverse DISC assessment. You know, those are available. You can do they're available online. They're available manually. I have the tool to do a reverse DISC assessment on any role, but it's determined by the person or people who know that role best. Okay, so based on what we now know around the job, the values that we're looking for, the behavior that we're looking for, the skill set, obviously, that you're also looking for, you can now start to design an ad. Yeah, or you know, whether it be online or newspaper or tied to lampposts, whatever it might be. However you're going to promote or put this out, LinkedIn, for instance, is a really good social media platform now for recruitment. We've now building a profile of the job, and so we're starting to put together what does the person who best fits this job going to look like? What are their values? What's their DISC profile? Now, we don't put in an ad. We were looking for a person with 75% D, 60% I, but what we're able to do is from the reverse DISC profile, the reverse DISC profile also will also allow us provide us with words and descriptors that fit that profile, and we use those words in the recruitment advert or process so that the attraction is to people of that DISC type. They don't know it, but you've used the right combination of words that DISC profile wants to see. You've used values that fit their values, and of course you have you have made it clear what are some of the fundamental skills that the person would have, and qualifications, of course. So there's your brief in terms of your advert. Start with the values, the words that actually connect with that disc style, the skills that you're looking for, and if there are qualifications, the qualifications that you're looking for. So now you've got a really solid recruitment profile, and you've put it out there, if you like. Okay, so what happens after this? Okay, what we want next is, now we're going to talk about the recruitment process. And this is a process of deselection, not selection. This is not about you having 50 candidates, in front of resumes on the desk in front of you. This is, and having to pick, the right ones. This is very much from here on in. It's what I call a process of deselection. You provide the right barriers, and in this case you'll see the hoops, and the candidates need to be able to jump through each hoop. They need to continue on the process. They deselect themselves. The best example of this, and I know it's an extreme one, but whether you've ever read much about the process of qualification for the SAS, I remember reading somebody's profile who was in the SAS, and they explained what the process was to get in. And the process to get in is not selection; it's deselection. They just keep putting a series of tests and tasks in front of everybody, and the people who don't pass deselect themselves. So they literally drop out. They come up to the instructors and say, I'm out, basically. And so those people who don't say I'm out are still in, or don't deselect themselves are still in. Your process needs to be something like that. You're not probably going to make everybody go through mud and ice water and barbed wire, but something akin to those things that are in your that connect in terms of your business. It's the same sort of thing. So just understand that now we're actually purposely putting up a series of hurdles that people need to jump through. And the first one is their initial response. So what do they do first up? What's the very first thing that they actually need to do? And this is important. So once you put your ad out there, it's about what they do next. In the ad, we need to put instructions on what to do. And if that means call this number at a certain time, personally, I always make those things at a certain time. I make them very clear. I make them, call on Tuesday or Wednesday between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock and ask for. Now, if you're looking for somebody clearly who you want to follow some instructions that you've already built, then this is the first test on whether they can follow instructions. If they email you, then they haven't read the notice. If they've failed that bit, then they're going to fail at following any other instructions that you have in your business. So these are part of the advertisement, is tell them what to do to respond. In the first instance, phone this number and be prepared to tell us, etc. Okay, so somebody turns up in person with their resume, clearly they haven't followed the instruction. Okay, so we tell them what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Okay, so it'll be call this number at this time and tell us ABC. It might be it could be put your resume together, deliver it in person by next Wednesday, on between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday. It's whatever you want to make it, and make it something that works for you. So many people, I suppose, put an ad in the paper and then spend the rest of their week being interrupted by random phone calls. Don't. set some parameters right from the start about what your expectations are about how people will apply, and ask 3 questions. So I'll give you an example of my methodology. Would be, in the first instance, respond by ringing this number at certain times, and be prepared to answer 3 key questions. Okay, so what are the 3 questions? Well, I ask, what was the biggest? Why did you respond? What was the one thing that attracted you to this position? How do you think you can add value to our business? And what is your one major objective right now in your personal life, for instance? So the 3 questions themselves aren't important. What's important is that people actually communicate. You get a feel for, number one, what is their thinking like, what is their expression like, what is their communication like, these sorts of aspects. The context is more important than the content. So do I do that on the personally? No, usually I would do it. The number that I would get people to call would have that on a unlimited answering machine, as in no time limit, so it doesn't cut off in 30 seconds, for instance. So if they spend 5 minutes telling you the answer to those 3 questions, then that's perfectly fine. Then you can, in your time, review those responses and just see, well, how well did they respond? Did they respond in the right time? Did they respond in the right method? And what was the how well did they answer those questions? So straight away, you haven't had to do really anything, but you've got a certain amount of data on those people right from the start. So there's our initial response. Now, did they pass? In reviewing that, did they follow the instructions? What is my opinion of their responses? How well do they communicate, etc.? And based on that, then I would send a job description out to them. So what I would do is I would email them, I would call and say, look, thanks for your application, thanks for your response to our advertising. I'm going to send you a job description with some instructions on what to do next, and I would simply send that out. Now, what I would ask next is, if this job looks appealing to you, if you'd still like to be considered for this job, then you need to send me your CV, your profile, your bio, whatever you want to call it, by a certain date and in a certain format and in a certain form. I then look through those CVs, so I've now got a lot of information about that person already. I would I would filter those based on what I'm looking for, and that would be more likely maybe skill set, maybe experience, maybe some of the things that they do outside of the business that gives me an indicator of what sort of person they're like, particularly in relation to disc profiling, and I would notify them next to do the next step. And the next step would be I would invite them to a group interview. So again, give the details of the group interview that sort of says, congratulations, you're still in the running for this job. We'd like to invite you to a group interview which will be held at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, the such and such a thing. Please come dressed appropriately and bring whatever you want them to bring. If there's anything, it might be and bring your best attitude. It could be simply that. Okay, so now we're asking them to do something again. Now, what happens if they don't respond? They're deselected. Make sense? That's the point. They're deselecting themselves. You're not having to do the work. Okay. Now we talk about the group interview. Well, here's the first few things. Punctuality. You can judge. How did they present themselves when they turned up? Were they flustered? Were they late? Well, if they were late, you probably locked the door, so they probably didn't get in the first place. But that's going to test their punctuality, their appearance, and your first impression. Were they appropriate? As in, did they dress appropriately? Did they present themselves well? Now it's over to you. You're going to then lead this group interview, and It's relatively short, so again, very efficient. And you're going to tell people about what your vision is for your company. Now, if this scares you and you don't know what your vision is for your company, do you think you might have some work to do before you actually start employing other people into your business? If you don't know what your company vision is, don't expect them to actually go down the right roads. So you're going to have to say, okay, here's is my company, here's who we are, here's where we're going. Why? Brightness of future. We're talking about people who want to get excited about where your company's going and want to help you get there. I want people who want to get on your bus. And to get on your bus, they have to know where your bus is going. Okay, so you're going to explain your company vision. You're going to explain your company values. What matters in this company? What are the rules, as it were? What's the overarching rules of the game? These are the values of our company. This is all to cement and attract the right people. You're going to actually just very quickly run through the position description again. I know they received it, but you're going to give it you're going to verbalise that job description. And by the way, the more current employees you've got at this process, the better. Why? You've just reinvigorated their or reminded them about your company vision and your company values as well. But you're also going to use them to actually become judges also. So it won't be just your decision. So you're going to go through the job description, position description, and then you're going to say to people, okay, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break. If this doesn't sound like the company that you want to work for, if this doesn't sound like the job that you thought it was, then I would invite you at this point in time, while we take the break, to take that opportunity to discontinue. I thank you for your time, I thank you for coming, and I wish you all the best. Now, at that point in time, some people may leave. What you'll say then is, if you come back after the break, I'll assume that the vision, the values, and the job all match what you want to do, and the company matches with where you want to go. Great. So does that make sense? So now now I'm going to take a quick break, maybe a bit of a walk around, you can have a cup of tea available. They can grab a quick drink or whatever. And when they come back, you know that the people who are in the room now have qualified for the next part. And the next part says, okay, I'm going to get you to do a personal presentation, just 5 minutes. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell me why you should get this job. Tell me why you think you're the person that I'm looking for. If they can't sell themselves, particularly if they're in a sales role, by the way, then they're never going to sell too much else. And how much do they need to prepare? Not much. You can tell them before the break that this is what they'll need to do, and so they can use the break to do a little bit of a preparation. The next thing I do is some form of skills assessment. If your job, the job that you're looking to fill, has a particular set of skills, and that might be, well, they fundamentally need to be good with numbers, or they need to be good with their hands, or they need to be, they need to have perspective, they need to be able to size something up quickly, then come up with a test that will actually test that skill. Not to the nth degree. If they're applying for a job as a builder, you don't need obviously to build a house, but think about what would be something that I could get them to do that would be skills assessment. If it's particular software that you've said in your original that they need to have experience in, think about, how will I test that? What will I get them to do that will actually test that? And then finally, I do a DISC assessment. Obviously, get them to fill out a DISC assessment, and then I take that away and assess it later, and determine what their profile is and see how well that matches. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good rundown of what the group interview starts to look like, and appreciate how much information now I've got about these people, and in the end, to be honest, how little work I've had to do to get it, because mostly the people themselves have continued to stay in the process. You can appreciate that the inappropriate people are dropping out along the way, and only the right people are actually sticking with this process. The next thing I will do is check references. I don't check references at the end of this process. The the next stage is to check references. So they've given you a CV, they've brought it with them, or remember they send it back in. So you've now got the opportunity to use reference checking as a filter, not as a final selection tool. You know, too many people that come down to the last person and then they do the reference checks. What you're going to do here now is, based on what you've already heard, I'll go back to here, based on the presentation, the skills assessment and the DISC assessment, you'll have probably knocked a few people out, or they'll have obviously knocked themselves out. The ones that are left will now do a reference check. That will probably eliminate a few more. Now we've got a short list. Now we re-interview them one-on-one. Now we talk about final selection based on that interview. So just, hopefully this makes sense. This is the precursor to what most people would see as their one and only process. Shortlist from a CV, interview, make a selection. Not enough information in that process. Clearly no deselections. Make or break fundamentally by how well they present in a 20-minute interview. So it's not comprehensive enough, that methodology. This is much more comprehensive. So a re-interview, now where I'm going to re-interview is I'm going to really refine, I'm going to talk more about some of the things that came up at the group interview. You're going to explore a few more avenues in terms of that. I'm going to take some notice about how they presented, what they presented, and it's clearly going to trigger some questions that'll be raised of me, and they will of course have some more defined questions as well that they will this interview, this personal interview, will enable them to ask. Then, if you can, my suggestion is, once you've made a final selection, before you sign any agreements, that you undertake some sort of paid trial, that you might employ them for 2 days, employ them for a day, employ them for a week, pay them, and how appropriate will they be to the actual job? Well, not really, but how well do they apply themselves? Can they follow instructions? Simple things to do. You know, if you really want to know somebody, well, they say, you know, employ them or go on holidays with them, one of the two. But how well do you get to know your friends differently when you go on holidays with them than just, you know, the interactions that you might have? You've got to have some way to actually go the next step and find out a little bit more about their nuances, if you like, and see whether they work for you or not. Then what do we do next? Now we're talking about an employment agreement. Everybody should have an employment agreement that details all of the details. If you don't have one, you can get them online. You can go to the government website and download an employment agreement that is current for your state. Very simple, costs you nothing. Modify it. Don't modify the fundamental legal requirements of it, but certainly you can add some detail to it around the specific job, or you attach the job description to the employment agreement. We should have a training program, an initial training program and an ongoing training program. So think about what you will train them in. Well, what will be their first day? What will be their first week? What is the training program over the first 3 months or 6 months? What do I need them to learn? How will that be taught? Okay, and then we're talking about reviews. So here's my suggestion in terms of timeliness or frequency of those reviews. The first thing you should review is after 1 day. So after their first day, at the end of that, so tell me, you know, what are your thoughts of the first day? What are your observations? Here are mine of you. What are yours of us? Okay, how well do you think you fit? I appreciate you don't, you know, you probably, it's pretty confusing at the moment, but, you know, how well did it fit with what we said in the first place? So after the end of the first day, after the end of the first week, after the end of the first month, and then after the end of the first quarter. After that, my suggestion is 6 monthly. A review is not a pay review. A review is a performance review. It's a how well, you know, where are you finding difficulty? What areas are you enjoying? What areas aren't you enjoying? what sort of things might we need to do to help you along? What support do you need? Those sorts of questions. Pay reviews, too many people put all the emphasis on, we have to review somebody because of their pay. No, you have to review people because of their performance and their training and what do I need to help them become better, not, well, how much, or we just have to have a review so as I know whether I'll give you CPI or a bit more. That's a completely separate process. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a whole different dimension to recruitment, and you can appreciate, I believe that getting the right people into a business is the single most important activity in the growth of any business. If you get the right people, your business will succeed. If you don't get the right people, it will be stuck or in fact go backwards. You'll be going back and forwards or backwards forever. They're more important than customers. We spend time reviewing, targeting, appreciating, profiling our best customers, and then just employ people who walk in the door. So this is it a major exercise? Absolutely it is, but how important is it to get the right people? If you're not getting the right people, then you're not doing the right things to get those people. You get the people you deserve. If you don't put the effort in to getting the right people, then you will get the people that is appropriate to the process that you're applying. If your entire process is, well, if they walk in the door and they hand over a resume, I employ them, then don't complain if at the end of it you're seeing lots of wrong people in your business. And so often it's the owner that sort of says, the problem is my people. Well, at the end of the day, you employed them, and they're your responsibility. So don't hand that back to them. Take responsibility. Make sure you put the right people in the first place, and make sure that then once you put them in, that you do the right things to ensure that they continue to help your business grow. Hope you've gotten a lot of out of this webinar. It'll be available, of course, as is always, our webinars are available on our website within a few days. But I want to just, as we finish up, make you aware of a few more opportunities that exist. The first one, of course, is I talked about DISC profiles. The DISC report that I've got that I utilise is an online DISC program. It's a 44-page DISC report. So you can undertake a 44-page DISC report for yourself, for your team, and for your team members. And you are also able to use these for obviously for your recruitment process. So individually they're $44. You can buy a group of 5 or a set of 5 for $198. My email address, paulhenschel@actioncoach.com. Just shoot me an email and say you'd like to undertake or undergo or grab that opportunity. The next webinar we have is called If Only Everyone on the Team Did It Like Me. It's about consistency, and it's about, if you like, reproducing yourself within the business so that everybody, now that we've got the right team, so that they're actually performing the tasks and procedures and processes the way that you want them done. Okay, so that's our next webinar. It's number 10 in the series. It's on the 10th of November, a Tuesday, the 10th of November, from 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And the other opportunity, the bookings for that, obviously, businessreeducation.com.au. So I think that brings us to the end of our webinar, hopefully right on time. The replays, of course, are available at businessreeducation.com.au/webinar recordings, and give it a little bit longer, but you'll also be able to find them on the City of Greater Bendigo's website under /business. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you've got a lot of learning out of it. Hope you apply the process and just appreciate how comprehensive and how well this process works, and in fact probably in the end takes you less time than potentially the process that you're using at the moment. Wish you all the best with your business, and hope you jump online for our next webinar in November, and bye for now.